quick to make statements, grand statements, like, I give you my life. And I think that's what Whitefield was saying. Okay, great.
What happens when one of America's most admired pastors starts questioning everything he built? Francis Chan, once hailed as the most radical pastor in America, gave away millions and walked away from a booming megachurch. He left fame behind to pursue a simpler, more demanding faith. But the road hasn't been easy. Behind public success lie profound struggles, unexpected controversies, and a search for authenticity that still unsettles many. Why has Chan's journey caused admiration and concern? And what does it tell us about the true cost of following Jesus? Early life and loss. Francis Chan's story begins with loss, before he even had a chance to understand what it meant. Born in a small apartment in San Francisco's Chinatown in 1967, his mother tragically died during childbirth. The newborn, crying beside his mother's lifeless body, entered a world marked by absence. There was not even a single photograph of her in the family albums, leaving Francis with a blank space that haunted his earliest memories. Raised mostly by his father, who suddenly faced the overwhelming task of raising 3 children alone in a foreign country, Francis grew up in a quiet, heavy household where survival mattered more than comfort. From a young age, he grappled with a profound question: how could a loving God allow a life to begin with so much pain? The uncertainty of his early years was compounded when, as a small boy, he was sent overseas to live with his grandmother in Hong Kong. The move plunged him into a vastly different culture, one filled with confusing Buddhist rituals, incense, temple chants, and warnings of spirits. His grandmother's devotions left Francis caught between worlds, unable to fully fit into either. Letters from home were scarce, and loneliness settled quietly in his heart. Even after returning to America, he carried with him the sounds and images of that distant life, torn between 2 very different realities. Tragedy struck again when Francis was 8 years old. His stepmother died in a violent car crash, reopening wounds that had never healed, and leaving the family shattered. Amid the quiet grief, moments of physical comfort were rare but deeply remembered, like his father's brief embrace on the way to identify her body. Yet grief continued to fill their home with silence and unspoken anger. Only a few years later, on his 12th birthday, came perhaps the hardest blow. His father died after a short battle with cancer. The day meant for celebration became a funeral, and Francis found himself completely alone, moving between relatives with a growing emptiness he could not explain. This pattern of loss seemed unreal. By the time he was 12, 3 mother figures were gone, and the man who had raised him was no longer there.
And then he died when I was 12, and he died of cancer, and I remember going to the funeral.
High school added another cruel chapter when an uncle, a close adult in Francis's life, slew his wife in a violent outburst before taking his own life. Francis arrived at the scene amidst flashing police lights and body bags, a haunting memory that refused to fade. By adulthood, death had marked nearly every key stage of his young life, leaving behind a silence louder than any voice, and questions about life and faith that no one could answer. Struggling with a tension between Buddhist and Christian teachings, bitterness and doubt settled deeply in his heart. The missing mother and the rare warmth of a distant father framed his early reflections on God. He often found himself alone with the question that circled endlessly: if God cared, why did life break so easily? These uncertainties would take years to confront, but they set the foundation for the spiritual journey ahead. That foundation was shaken and rebuilt again as Francis moved toward adulthood and finally grappled with faith in a way that would surprise even him. The losses that marked his early life shaped the questions he'd carry, but would also fuel his intense pursuit of answers. Despite a childhood shadowed by grief, a turning point was on the horizon, a shift that would lead him toward the pulpit and global influence. Rise to prominence. Francis Chan's early adulthood marked a decisive turn toward faith because his quest for truth brought him to that point. He enrolled at Talbot School of Theology at Biola University to study biblical texts because he wanted to comprehend their meaning, which had previously confused him. After completing his studies, he became a youth pastor at a Chatsworth church, where he demonstrated his teaching skills and established connections with young people. From his external appearance, Francis displayed a complete understanding of everything because he showed high energy and strong speaking skills while delivering his unyielding message about repentance and purity. The internal tension developed between him and his surroundings. The gap between his actual behavior and his preached standards became too much for him to handle. The internal struggle pursued him throughout every waking hour because it created an unfamiliar sensation in him. The conflict reached a breaking point, which compelled him to leave ministry work without drawing attention to his departure. The change appeared immediate to others, but Francis experienced the transformation process over multiple years. He exchanged his sermon notes for dinner order forms, which pushed him into a waiting job that demanded complete self-examination. The simple daily activities turned into a space where his arrogance decreased, and his faith started to become authentic once again. Francis established a relationship with Lisa, who became his life partner during the time period when he needed her most. Their initial time together created relationship wounds that developed into problems as they both searched for security. Their marriage faced difficulties from both arguments and their fears, which they eventually transformed into a power source through shared experiences of suffering. They discovered that faith provided them with renewed strength, while their battles remained intact. The group that started their first church service organized their first meeting in Simi Valley in 1994. The initial group of people who used to meet in a small garage space grew into a larger organization. The combination of Francis's life experiences and his humble nature, plus his urgent need for faith, attracted young people who wanted to find genuine spirituality. The events created a lively atmosphere because attendees experienced emotional breakdowns while they learned about previously unresolved issues. The small church experienced rapid growth during the next few years, which resulted in the congregation moving into a space that could accommodate more than 1,000 people. The growth of the church did not affect the intensity of Francis's preaching, which remained constant. He urged his audience members to dedicate their entire lives to God, while they should avoid selecting paths that would provide them with simple pleasures.
For the church is to love one another. Yes. He says, this is my new commandment, that you love one another.
Francis established Eternity Bible College in 2004 to provide educational programs for students who wanted to study deeply and serve their missions throughout the world. He started to question whether his church's increasing size would result in a decrease in the communal worship experience, which he believed should exist according to biblical teachings. His rising prominence came with remarkable success, but also growing internal conflict that foreshadowed the next chapter of his spiritual journey. Sometimes the loudest preaching masks the deepest questions, and Francis was no exception. Challenges within the ministry. As Francis Chan's ministry expanded, so did the pressures and struggles beneath the surface. Despite thousands filling his church and millions reading his books, he wrestled with exhaustion and spiritual tension. The public image of power and influence often concealed a man increasingly burdened by doubts about what true faith and church life looked like. One of the persistent challenges was the disconnect he observed between attendance and authentic involvement. While many came weekly to hear sermons, the spiritual gifts and active participation the New Testament describes seemed largely dormant. Francis found himself questioning whether large organized churches, with costly buildings and programs, were ultimately nurturing true discipleship or creating spectators. This internal tension pushed him to seek change within his own community. He began pushing for smaller groups, where believers would pray for one another and serve actively instead of passively listening. These efforts met mixed reactions. Some members reported healings and spiritual breakthroughs, but others became uncomfortable with the new demands, leading to attendance dips and growing pains. Despite the challenges, Francis firmly believed that ministry should empower every believer to serve rather than simply receive. He often cited underground churches, especially those in China, as models of faith thriving without grand buildings or expensive programs. His desire was to foster that kind of authentic, participatory church, even if it meant instability. At the same time, the personal cost deepened. His family life felt the strain of constant travel and the pressures of ministry expectations. Lisa, caring for 7 children, largely at home, carried an enormous burden, often hidden from public view. Moments of discouragement and exhaustion shadowed the family behind their public image of faithfulness. Francis's financial choices added to the pressure. He refused a pastoral salary and gave away much of his income, including royalties from best-selling books, to charities rescuing exploited women and children. While many applauded his radical generosity, it also meant living without a safety net and facing ongoing uncertainty. By 2010, this growing tension reached a breaking point. Standing before his large congregation, Francis shocked many by announcing his resignation as pastor, insisting that staying might do more harm than good. He explained his conviction that the megachurch model wasted spiritual gifts and creativity, and that smaller, simpler gatherings were healthier for authentic faith to grow. The challenges inside ministry revealed that success is not always the measure of spiritual health, and that wrestling with doubt and change is part of many faithful journeys. Each difficult step prepared Francis Chan for a new way of living and leading, a way that would test not only his beliefs, but his very identity. Radical shift and house churches. Francis Chan dedicated himself to building house churches after leaving Cornerstone Church because he wanted to move away from megachurch existence. His family moved to San Francisco after he departed from large public gatherings to establish small house churches. The gatherings took place in living rooms where all participants shared equal power and nobody had special status. The atmosphere created a basic and raw experience that focused on human connections instead of efficiency. The environment demanded that people show themselves because there was no way to hide. The environment required all participants to take part in 3 different activities, which included prayer, teaching, and practical service. The physical closeness created a stronger bond between people, but it also created situations that needed to be resolved. People started to argue about everything, which led to personal conflicts that they could not escape. His vision was shaped partly by underground churches in places like China, where believers gather without formal systems or resources. He believed that kind of simplicity could foster deeper commitment and shared sacrifice. The situation created multiple difficulties that people needed to solve. Some organizations succeeded, while others failed and chose to revert to conventional church practices, which required less effort. The ministry work brought him to his breaking point, but he discovered inner peace, which he had never known during his time running a large church. He dedicated himself to spiritual growth and development because he no longer needed to preserve his church's membership numbers and public reputation. The work seemed to lack impact and visibility, but it matched his beliefs about how people should practice their religious faith in everyday situations. The family's experience underwent changes because he chose to work from home. The couple raised their 7 children outside of public view, which helped their children understand both the responsibilities of being in ministry and the importance of living a balanced existence. The couple moved their family from public life to private life, which changed their understanding of faith and service and their personal identity. The house church model started to gain traction after a period of development. A new generation of leaders took charge, while small groups expanded across various locations to establish an independent organizational structure. The movement had established itself by 2020 through small transformations that proved essential to its success because they demonstrated that effectiveness does not depend on magnitude or public exposure. Chan did not abandon his responsibilities when he chose to become executive director, because he was creating a new model for leadership development. He established a church model that used active community participation and humble service to God through biblical teachings and church growth measurements. His later work required him to tackle his previous work, whereas his early work established the basis for his future conflicts and public disputes. The bridge between a simpler faith and broader controversies would soon reveal tensions that many found hard to reconcile. Controversies and criticism. In recent years, Francis Chan has faced growing debate and division among followers and critics. In 2019, he appeared alongside charismatic leaders like Benny Hinn, Todd White, and Bill Johnson, figures some of his longtime supporters distrusted. Photos of Chan warmly interacting with them spread quickly, leading to accusations that he was endorsing questionable teachings. For many who once saw him as a steady voice, the moment created confusion and concern. Chan responded by saying he speaks at many events to reach audiences who may not otherwise hear biblical teaching. He admitted he had not carefully vetted every speaker and promised to seek wiser counsel moving forward. Still, he refused to completely distance himself from such platforms, believing outreach mattered more than strict separation. This response only deepened the divide. Some respected his mission, while others questioned his discernment. That same year, Chan shared a story about praying for the sick in a remote Asian village and witnessing immediate healing. Supporters saw it as evidence of active spiritual gifts.
And everyone's eagerly pursuing the spiritual gifts like 1 Corinthians tells us to do.
While skeptics raised concerns about the lack of proof and possible exaggeration. The reaction highlighted how polarized opinions about his ministry had become. In early 2020, another shift stirred controversy. Chan taught that Christ might be present in communion in a deeper way than he had previously believed, influenced by early Christian writings. Some welcomed this renewed reverence, but others worried he was moving closer to Catholic theology. Speculation about a possible conversion surfaced, though Chan continued to identify as Protestant, leaving many uncertain about his direction. These changes contributed to a growing sense that his path was becoming unpredictable. Once known for clear, bold stances, Chan's evolving views unsettled parts of his audience. The tension between holding firm convictions and exploring deeper theology created unease on multiple sides. Behind the scenes, personal pressures added weight. Years of travel, ministry demands, and raising 7 children strained family life. His wife, Lisa, later shared the challenges of balancing constant movement with parenting. Their private struggles contrasted with the public image many admired. Amid the criticism, Chan's radical generosity remained consistent. He gave away book royalties, refused a pastoral salary, and led a church that prioritized mission over comfort. Yet, even with such sacrifice, he wrestled with the gap between spiritual passion and lasting discipleship. Altogether, the controversies reveal a leader deeply committed to faith, but navigating complex and often difficult ground. The evolving contours of his ministry set the stage for his ongoing reflections and the urgent warnings he now shares about the state of the church and authentic discipleship. Current reflections and future. The recent years have shown Francis Chan entering a peaceful yet purposeful period, which contains his meditation on church leadership and his urgent need to establish church direction. After he left the network he built, he started traveling again, but now prefers to do so at smaller events which focus on interactive discussions instead of formal speech presentations. The organization now concentrates its efforts on establishing personal relationships and authentic development instead of operating its previous extensive ministry programs. Chan has grown increasingly concerned about what he calls consumer faith, where people attend services without deep commitment. He now communicates his message through direct speech, which tells believers to stop practicing comfort-based spirituality and start following God even when it requires them to make sacrifices. The approach he now uses enables him to reach his faith goals, even though he previously attracted audiences to major events through his public speaking. The house church model he has long supported remains central, though he openly admits its challenges. The small group, which which consists of close relationships, enables members to hold each other accountable while building authentic friendships. Chan acknowledges that he once underestimated how difficult true community can be. People usually reach their growth potential through painful experiences, which create discomfort. Not all of these groups have lasted. Some people have returned to traditional churches where expectations feel lighter. Chan has accepted the faults that exist in this less complicated quest. The organization now prioritizes unbroken dedication, which its members practice through unrecognized faithfulness that produces enduring outcomes. The family has experienced changes because of the new organizational structure. He and his wife, Lisa, chose a more private life, raising their children away from the spotlight. Their family learned about faith and service through this contrast between public recognition and their current silent life. Chan maintains his presence through his work with leaders and small groups whom he helped to develop. His impact now spreads more quietly through his work, which shows that faith develops through personal connections instead of public acknowledgement. Chan will spend his time until his death, which he dedicates to authentic faith practice with believers who dedicate themselves to community service and daily service instead of pursuing personal comfort or public recognition. Francis Chan's story challenges us to reconsider what true faith and leadership look like when the spotlight fades. His journey reminds us that real discipleship often involves struggle, humility, and a willingness to leave comfort behind. If you found this exploration meaningful, please like and subscribe for more stories that cut beneath the surface of faith and life. Your support helps us share deeper, more honest narratives every week.